Wow. We got something. We're in. It thinks I'm Falcon. Hello.
Shall we play a game?
Oh.
I think it missed him.
Yeah, weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Love to. How about global thermonuclear war?
Blood-curdling, spine-chilling, heart-racing fear. You are now listening to Dark Waters, the King of Horror.
Have you ever found yourself in a dark place in life? And by dark, I mean where everything is going wrong. Your health is failing, finances destroyed, relationships strained. A place where you question your own insanity. Where you're not sure if you want to live or die. Well, 2 years ago, I was in such a place. I had just been evicted from my apartment in New Orleans and was forced to move back to McLean, Mississippi. This move was a major adjustment for me. I had not been back to Mississippi for 2 years since my father died, and now I was back in our old, dilapidated family home. At that time, we only had one working window unit for a 1,300 square foot house, and my dad's furniture was still inside. I guess my auntie had never really mustered the strength to throw any of his stuff away, so the house smelled like old people, and you know how that is. The roof was leaking, the roaches had taken over, but with no job and only about $3,000 to my name, this place was my only option. It took me a few days to get the place cleaned up, and it broke my heart to throw my dad's old clothes away. But once it was all said and done, the place looked good. And after this whirlwind of change, moving, cleaning, and scrubbing, I needed a drink. So I headed out to the local convenience store to grab a bottle of whiskey. Only to discover that although this was a wet county, you couldn't buy alcohol in Mississippi before 12 noon. And this was only another depressing reminder that I was no longer in New Orleans. So I went back home, sat on the porch. It was hot, and the road to my family home, which had never been paved, was made of red dirt, and this dirt rolled back and forth and twisted and turned with the wind, almost like it had a life of its own. I sat there and waited till 12 noon and headed back to get that bottle of whiskey. When I returned back home, I sat there babysitting that drink for the next few hours, thinking to myself, how in the hell did I end up back here? Back in this place. I swore never to return here. And to be honest with you, I think I was in the belly of a depression. That evening, my Aunt Bobby passed a check on me. Now, she had always been the most faithful, God-fearing woman I'd ever known. She sat with me for a little while and prayed that I would get a revelation. Something that would show me God's will and intentions in my life. And then, right before she walked out, Aunt Bobby left me with this CD. A sermon from a pastor I had never heard before. His name was T.D. Jakes. Now, you got to understand something. I'm not a church-going type of person. But I was at my wit's end. So I popped the CD in, and I sat there with the front door open and listened to that CD on repeat over and over again.
Who betrayed you? He said, when you come to the end of that, you come to the end of it. You come to the... How do I know I've come to the end? See how it's slowing up? What used to hurt me? What used to bother me? What used to depress me? Doesn't depress me anymore. Can I preach this thing this morning? Can I preach it? He says, this is what Paul wrote Timothy about.
Trying to let these words seep into my soul. Now, I'm not sure if you've ever experienced this, where you're listening to something and you know the person is not talking to you, but it seems like the words are meant directly for you. Well, it was almost like this man was talking directly to me. He was talking about how when you come down to your last drop, you will never ever stand up and reach your goals until you stop feeling sorry for yourself. That's the only way you can make things better.
Because as long as you're feeling sorry for yourself, you're giving yourself permission to fail. And as long as
Now, I can't tell you how long I was sitting there, but it went to well after dark. I had broken down in tears and cried, and I don't mean like a small teardrop here or there. I mean ugly, painful tears. And to be honest with you, the release made me feel a lot better. And as I'm sitting there, I started to hear this growling sound. It was low at first, like a little bit of a rumble. And I almost didn't catch it. But then it got louder. So loud that I could hear it over the preacher's words. And the sound was coming from the woods across the roadway. So I grabbed the remote for the CD player and turned the volume down so I could hear a little bit better. And to this day, I still remember thinking to myself, man, somebody done let their dog loose and is growling at me in the dark. This is crazy. But as I turned the sound down, the growling stopped. So I turned it back up again, leaned back in my chair, and continued to listen. The minute I turned that sound back up, the growling returned. And now I'm confused. So I look over and I realize I backed my car in the driveway. And I still have my keys in the pockets of my pants. So I decided to hit the unlock button on my keychain. That way the headlights could light up the woods across the road from me. And dude, when those headlights lit up, I was in complete shock. I dropped my keys and started leaning forward, and I couldn't believe what my eyes were showing me. I felt like I was in some kind of damn movie. Just on the other side of that road was a creature, skinny looking, and it looked like a dog. It had this long furry tail. And the craziest part was, this thing was walking on its back legs. Its fur was black, but it had the red dirt all over it, like it had been rolling around on the ground. And it behaved so damn oddly. It paced and moved back and forth in this jerking motion, staring at the headlights of the car. Its eyes kind of lit up this amberish yellow color. And it looked pissed. I mean, pissed. This thing stood there, looked at the headlights, and then looked at me. Looked at the headlights, then looked back at me. Now, I can't tell you why I wasn't afraid. I guess the fear hadn't kicked in or my brain hadn't wrapped around what was going on. But I sat there in shock and watched as this thing tried to step its foot onto the roadway. I mean, it would raise its foot and go to step out into the road and then pull it back. And every time it did it, it got more pissed off. Now, I sat there for about a solid minute to a minute and a half. And then my brain kicked in and said, this is a monster. And I felt this rush of adrenaline, hopped up out of that chair, ran into the house and closed the door. When I looked back out of the window, the lights from my car had gone out. So I hit the button again. And now, this thing was sitting there with its back turned to the roadway. Of course, anybody hearing this story is going to assume that I was drunk. But let me tell you something. I only had one glass of whiskey, and I worked as a bartender on Bourbon Street. So my tolerance for alcohol is way higher than one glass of cheap whiskey. But what happened next was even more strange. I swear to you, it was almost like someone was there with me, because I heard a voice tell me right in my ear, turn it up and open the door. And without thinking, I turned that preacher up as loud as I could and opened that door. And then I hit the lights on the car again. And when I looked out of that door, the thing was standing up with one hand over its ear and walking back into the woodline. Talk about being confused. For a second, I thought I had lost my damn mind. But as it walked away into the woods, I slammed the door, locked it, and went into the back bedroom of the house. The next morning, I get up and I walked those woods for 3 hours trying to figure out what the hell it was I saw, but couldn't find a thing. A few days later, I told my auntie, and she totally believed me, which surprised the hell out of me. Now, she never said exactly what she thought this thing was, but she only told me, son, there's power In the blood of Jesus.
Devil, I've come to my last year. Now I'm ready to be offered up. God said, if you're through crying, get rid of that cup. Get rid of it. Lay it down. I'll give you the garment of praise for the spirit of...
Number 1. Michigan Dogman. Submitted by Jenkins. I've had some very interesting experiences with the supposed dogmen of Michigan. The first encounter I had with these curious and strange beings was calm and serene, believe it or not. It felt as though I wasn't in any danger and everything was okay. But my second encounter was deathly different, and it left me with a feeling of dread and worry and fear. Both encounters took place within 2 weeks of each other, at night, in the same rough area, and there happened to be snow on the ground. I'll begin with the first. Though I've had to move closer to Detroit for a better job and education, I still frequently go out into the country to visit my grandma. She and my late papa took me in when I was a teenager and raised me upright. Since she stays up late, I frequently go over later in the night, and I smoke with her a while before going to bed and spending the night there. My first encounter took place in the second week of December of 2017, on one of these such nights. I'd left the small town of Emmett and was passing by the old country market on the corner of the crossroads of the paved road and the dirt road that my grandma lives on. It was a rare occasion, as I hadn't turned on my radio, and I was mainly just contemplating where my life was going. You see, my dad passed away in early June of the same year, and I'd found myself in an overpriced apartment with our remaining family dog and my new cat. It was a nerve-wracking change, and I was soon thinking over all the things that could have been and would never be anymore. The slow speed limit on this road gave me plenty of time to ponder over my life, and it also let me feel a distinct change in the scenery. Up ahead, the treetops seemed to move far less. Sure, the forest would block a lot of wind from moving bushes and dead cattails, but the treetops usually moved freely with the wind. The only reason I noticed how still the night was because my eyes were drawn to the bright moon, acting as a sentinel to all the nighttime travelers. On the other side of the road, the treetops were swaying and bending to the wind's whims, but for some reason, on the right side, they were like statues. It struck me as odd, but it didn't scare me, really. Deciding to check out what might be going on in those woods, I slowed to a stop in front of them. This was the area that divided my grandma's property from her neighbors. At first, my eyes noticed nothing as they adjusted, but once they were fully adjusted to the dark, they did focus in on something. The figure, it was dark brown with touches of black and white. It was fur that I was looking at, and then I saw a face as well as a tail. The animal was on all fours. It looked similar to a massive husky or malamute of some sort. I was genuinely concerned that someone had lost their pet, so I began to grab a Slim Jim I'd bought and some of my cheese crackers, hoping to lure it over. The thought that this animal may be aggressive never even crossed my mind, since my gut was telling me it was safe. I've found lost dogs before in these woods and had managed to get them to come with me at night, so this was really nothing new. Cracking open my car door slowly, I stepped out into the frigid air and began to approach the edge of the woods. Without the dark tinted windows limiting my sight, I could see the large dog was staring at me. It had the most human-looking blue eyes. They were deep and vivid and emotional. All the regret and sadness I felt from overthinking life in the car ride began to vanish away from my mind. My mind was instead releasing the negativity and overcome with serenity as this beautiful creature's stare persisted, as if it was telling me everything was going to be okay. I'm not sure how long I stood there, gazing into those blue eyes, but I was almost shocked out of my daze when this thing that I thought was a dog stood up on 2 legs, then sprinted away like a human jogger. It took such long strides that I knew I couldn't have kept up with it if I tried. In seconds, it had disappeared into the night. Due to the clear moon, I should have been able to see it better, but it seemed to just wisp away with the wind. And speaking of which, oddly enough, the wind was once more rocking the treetops. I stood there, outside my car, leaning on the passenger side for several minutes. Curiosity and wonder were coursing through my veins, and my need for answers held me to my spot. I wanted to see if I could see the gentle and wonderful creature once more. Once my nose began to go numb, I forced myself back into my car and drove the 20 feet to my grandma's driveway. Once in the house, I asked my grandma if she had seen anything, but she hadn't. But her dogs were very much on edge, and they were looking out the windows constantly in her bedroom because her windows faced towards that same stretch of woods. They weren't angry. They didn't have any fur standing up. They just looked out the windows attentively, as though they weren't sure how to feel about whatever they were seeing or waiting for. After seating myself across from Grandma at the table to smoke, I told her of my sighting of the weird giant dog, and I told her of the way it walked on 2 legs. She said she had never seen anything like it, but she did believe me. I was told that I was crazy for ever leaving my car for a giant dog like that. Whether my gut told me it was safe or not, my grandma didn't trust stray dogs, let alone some werewolf. We dropped the matter after I was scolded and continued to smoke cigarettes while we chit-chatted and caught up.